you have the salmon that you wrote, that basically it boils down to Eidech Alem and Bisurin.
Right.
So would that be a proper hechsher if you sold the salmon?
To people who knew me, loved me, trusted me, that's fine. You don't need a hechsher.
Well, yeah, right.
The idea of a hechsher is somebody's giving an edus that this is edible, that this is kosher, that Jews may, according to the Torah or the laws of the Rabbanim, may eat it. And that's perfectly allowed. But I wrote very carefully that I'm not giving a hechsher, I'm not fooling somebody. There is a pizza store in Los Angeles. And here we'll go a little bit carefully because maybe the facts have changed, but let's pretend we're 30 years ago. A beautiful pizza store. Everyone, you know how important, and pizza is practically pikuach nefesh. And there are 3 partners, 2 rabbis and an Italian goy. One rabbi is in Besmedish in Chicago.
Sounds like a joke's coming.
Another, no, this is no joke, this is very sad. One rabbi is in Chicago, in Besmedish, is teaching actually. Another rabbi is in Los Angeles. At the time he was in Besmedish. And the Italian goy is in the pizza parlor. And the rabbi let it be known, allowed people to think that he gave a hechsher on the pizza store, but in fact he was a partner in the pizza store. As far as I'm concerned, that's absolutely invalid. If he would say, I'm a partner and I think it's kosher, people could evaluate that information. But if he says, he's got a pizza store and I'm giving a hechsher, that is different. And I maintain that once you leave the milchiks, the chalav, right? We said champag needs 1 chosam. We've got the chalav, we've got the gavina. Once you leave that in the hands of the goy, and it's his store, remember, he's a balabas, and when he owns it, the laws of mirtes are different. If it's my thing, and he's playing with it, and he knows he could be caught, he's a little bit more afraid than if it's his thing. What do you say? You're playing with your thing. So, arrest me. I call up my butcher, and I tell him what I want, and he says, no problem, we'll have the delivery this afternoon. Now, if the delivery man shows up with a payas and a beard, if the delivery man shows up with payas and a beard, even his short payas, even he used a sam to remove his beard, we won't get into the discussion of electric shaver, which I believe is an Issa Deraisa, so we won't talk about that at all. But a Shomer Shabbos looking man or a lady who's wearing a shaitel not from India, and believe me, the Indian hair is 100% kosher, you're just not allowed to wear it in the street, or she's wearing a tichel, and we're not getting involved with any side issues, right? And a Shomer Shabbos person brought the meat to me, no problem whatsoever. If Ahmad, Musa, and Isa, and who knows, Bracha come with the meat.
Or a Machal Shabbos.
Or a Machal Shabbos, yes. Or somebody who's chashud. Right? He's a Shomer Shabbos, but he's chashud on kashrus. He's suspected of playing games. All those cases, unless the meat was properly sealed, I may not eat it. So it has to be sealed again in a way that I will know if something has been done, or that he's afraid that I might know. We were making a...
It needs 2 seals in this case?
Yes, indeed. 2 seals.
This would be a problem also for pizza.
Pizza, yes, indeed. We got that on the list.
Needs 1 seal.
1 seal pizza. Unless it's pepperoni pizza, and then in that case... in that case, feed it to the seal. Okay, we were making a simcha, whether it was a bris, a bar mitzvah, something. Anyway, we were getting cholent from an Eideh Charedis caterer. And we started out with their parva cholent, and we wanted them to put meat in it. But we wanted to have the meat that we wanted in it, not the meat that's sold to the public. Now, Eideh Charedis has 3 types of meat. They have meat which is shechted in Chutz La'aretz. They have 2 kinds of meat which is shechted locally. The one that they call glat, and the one that is glat. And we get the one that is glat. And so I wanted my meat to go into that cholent, and we had to make arrangements with my butcher and with Rav Bronsdorfer Zecher Livrocha, we could throw in a Zecher Tzaddik Livrocha, that he would supervise it himself, Rav Bronsdorfer, put the chosamas on it, and then it would go to the caterer, and then the caterer was allowed to accept it. But if I would have brought it from my butcher, they weren't going to accept it under any circumstances whatsoever. The hechsher wouldn't allow it. That's the way it must be. delivery must be by a from person, and if you're under a hechsher, it must be by a from person who's acceptable to the hechsher, or it must be sealed properly according to the halacha in a way that it can't be switched. Many years ago, a conservative rabbi told me a story which he thought was a little bit funny, but we think is just the bare minimum. He had a shul in Alexandria, Virginia, and he told me about somebody was making a bar mitzvah, and they wanted it to be kosher, and they brought a kosher caterer from Baltimore, and the goy drove up with the truck, handed the rabbi the letter, and asked the rabbi to remove the seal from the lock to the truck. That is the way it's supposed to be. Of course, once it got into the hands of the conservative rabbi, it wasn't kosher anymore. But at least up to that point, that's the way it must be.
So when a delivery person brings you from a takeout food store, it has to have chosamos.
A must have chosamos.
So I once, can I tell us a war
Sure.
story? So I went to a restaurant, I don't know, a fast food place. I went to a fast food place, and they had a certain hechsher, but the delivery had no chosamos whatsoever. So I called up the hechsher agency, whose name I will not say, and I asked them, how could you give a hechsher on this takeout food store? They make deliveries without any chosamos, and they had the nerve to, they said, we only give a hechsher on the store, we don't give a hechsher on the deliveries.
And this is all over the place. You've got many caterers with excellent hechsher, and the hechsher specifically says once it leaves the premises, unless your simcha has called for a mashgiach, which Yechiel talks about all the time, extremely important. If they tell you, you get to the chasna, what hechsher, they'll tell you Eida Charedis. A quick check is look for the bottle of Carmel wine on the head table. Because Eida Charedis, whether it's kosher or not, we won't get into, unless we have time. Eida Charedis does not accept Carmel. So if there's a bottle of Carmel wine on the table, you know that it doesn't have hechsher of the Eida Charedis. What you do is you go into the kitchen, you ask to speak to the mashgiach. If there is no mashgiach, have a glass of seltzer. If there's a mashgiach, then there are questions to ask. If it was prepared in an Eida Charedis canteen, we'll call it, koshering house, whatever you want to call it, and it got there and there's no mashgiach, that means the Eida Charedis does not give hashgach on it. It may be 100% kosher, it may not.
Okay.
Okay.
By the way, in its Pesach manual, I think it's page 65, if I remember correctly, says b'feirush, once anything leaves any of the stores, they're done.
Right. Okay, now let's take I promised to answer certain questions, and some of them are coming right up here on this page, so let's get to some of them. Under what circumstances can you leave a non-Jewish or non-from maid or babysitter in the house, and under which circumstances not? Now my poor beleaguered wife is sitting in the back row, and she will tell you, and we lived in Los Angeles for 15 years, and in Los Angeles you've got tons of Mexicans who came across the border, and at 100 pounds each, it takes 20 Mexicans to make a ton, and they are working for very low wages. And so even somebody who's in Koil can afford to have a maid several times a week. And I told my poor wife, I said, you can have a maid, but A, she may not cook or touch the dishes, and B, she may never be in the house unless you are there. And my wife said, thank you, we don't need a maid that much. One of the rabbis that I used to respect in Los Angeles, and because I used to respect him, I will not mention his name, was giving a shiur on the very subject of maids. A whole shiur on the subject of maids. And he told a story, he personally, they were sharing his family a maid with another family. In the morning at the other family, in the afternoon at his. And the other family called up and said, the maid just cooked b'mezid basav v'chalav in our kitchen. Right? So this is somebody that we know, besides being a shiksa, is not trustworthy because she was told not to do it. She was told not to cook, and she cooked basav v'chalav. All the kalim are treif. They fired that maid, but they took a different maid. Another friend, he's even a resident of Ramat Beit Shemesh, and I will not make the serious mistake of referring it to just Beit Shemesh. We on Ramat Beit Shemesh. Yechiel warned me. They had a maid, and it was justified because he worked full time. His wife had a daycare at home, She was home most of the time, but she was working hard. She needed help. And they had a maid, and the maid was under strict instructions. She was not allowed to cook anything. But they didn't depend on the strict instructions. They had an electric stove, and when they went out of the house, they removed the fuse at the fuse box so that she couldn't cook even if she wanted to, and she tried. And a different maid, she was acting suspiciously. And the balabasta opened up her purse because she thought she had stolen money. No, her purse had basa v'cholav in it that she had cooked on their kalim, meat and milk.
Well, let's forget about cooking. You left a piece of meat open in the refrigerator.
Correct. So, we have a shipment in Shulchan Aruch which discusses this exact issue. You leave a non-Jew or Machal Shabbos alone in your house, which is the case of your babysitter. There's little babies, they're not really being mashgiach on too much. Or in the case of a maid, people go to work, they want the house to be clean when they come home. My son, his wife works, he works. They should live me well, they should have lots of money and not need to work. And their circumstances made them think that they were forced to take a non-Jewish child care worker. And what they did, because my son was raised in my house after all, is his wife works close to home, and she's able to come in throughout the day. And they arranged with other frum people in the building to come in unannounced into their house, so that the maid would always know somebody may be showing up. But if the maid knows for sure that she's got clear time, let's just say that you live in Washington Heights, fine yeke, and your wife works in the Bronx, who knows what, and all the maid has to do is call up each of the people to say she had some issue that she had to ask them. She knows it's going to take an hour and a half with traffic for them to get home. That means there is no yotze v'nichnas. In a case where there was a Baal Tshuva, and he was living in his parents' home, and they had kalim for him, so he could cook kosher, and they bought kosher meat for him, and Rav Moshe Feinstein, Zecher Levracha, Zecher Tzadik Levracha, the Gadol Ador of America, in a previous generation, said that in his own parents' house he should put chosamos on each piece of meat. I, at one point in my dochak, I had hired a babysitter for my kids when they came home from school, Russian Jewish lady, and she was too busy. She sent her kid, and I came home, and there they were with the pizza box. And they had heated up this pizza in my oven, and they had written in English, bad English at that, kosher pizza, but we knew it was not a kosher pizza, and I cried bitter tears. That was the first oven that I had bought as a brand new oven that didn't have to kosher, and then I had to kosher it. And it is foolishness. I'll tell you another story, very important story. The parents are getting ready to go on a vacation, but they want to have a vacation from the kids also, so the maid is going to stay with the kids. And they are locking up the silver and the china and who knows what. And the kids said, "Why are you doing that?" "Because we're locking up the valuables so that the maid won't steal them." And the kids said, "Aren't we valuable?" Which leads right into another story. Neighbors of ours came back in the afternoon or the evening. The only thing left in the house was the naked baby on the bare floor. They had stolen even the baby's diaper. And Baruch Hashem, they didn't steal the baby because another family, somebody stole the baby and they caught the baby at the border to Mexico. Baruch Hashem. But